Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Go for it.
Oh, wait. When you say go for it, can I just go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm gonna try this and make sure that it works. I'm going to let all the attendees know what I told the organizers previously. I've been having internet problems over the past couple of months, so if I drop off, I will try to come back. In the meantime, though,
Oh, and can I make one note? Sorry. If anyone has
yes.
any questions for our guest speaker, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom in the bottom bar because this is a webinar.
Mhm.
So use the Q&A to put your questions in there, and we'll answer them at the end.
Okay. Cool. And then I'm gonna let you collapse so I can actually read stuff on the screen. Isn't there like usually, wait. There it is. Yeah. All right, cool. Anyway, so that's just whatever. That's my little splash page, but oh, okay. Anyway, whatever. My name is David Peterson. I create languages for television shows and movies, and here's a quick list of them. So Game of Thrones is probably one that's very well known, lesser well known, but my favorite project that I ever worked on was Defiance, show on Sci-Fi, where it was the first show that I worked on where I got to create writing systems as well as the languages themselves. And so I just had a ton of fun on that one. Next was Star-Crossed, a show that ran for a season on the CW. And there was Thor, the Dark World. That was the second one, the one that nobody liked. Dominion, which was a show on Sci-Fi. The 100, which just recently completed its run. I started working on that in season 2 and then worked on it through the finale. That was last year. Penny Dreadful, I worked on for season 2. That was a good one. The Shannara Chronicles, I worked on that both seasons. The Warcraft movie, Doctor Strange, Emerald City. That was one that was just one season on NBC. Bright, which is Netflix. That was a fun one. I was actually on set for that almost every single day because it's the only thing I've ever worked on that filmed in Hollywood. Everything else, somewhere else in the world. Into the Badlands, and actually technically it was downtown Los Angeles, but you know what I mean. Anyway, I worked on Into the Badlands for season 3. That was a really fun one on AMC. The Christmas Chronicles, and then also the Christmas Chronicles 2. I guess I should do a picture for that. This is a game called Arena of Valor, which was a port of a Chinese game whose name I forget. And it's just a MOBA game, but they had me create 4 languages for it and 4 writing systems. And so they're actually pretty good, at least the languages were. Another Life, a show on Netflix. It's recently filmed its 2nd season, and so that should be up sometime this year. The Witcher, still ongoing. We're still working on season 2, almost done. Motherland Fort Salem is a show that I created a language called Minishe for with another language creator named Jesse Sams, who's a professor at Stephen F. Austin University. And we are currently still working on season 2. Shadow and Bone is upcoming on Netflix. This is the adaptation of a friend's book series where I created 2 languages and 2 writing systems. And then the Fjorden language I created with the help of language creator Christian Thalmann from Switzerland. The Dune film that was supposed to come out on December 18th, but was pushed to October 21st of this year. So still looking forward to that. And then I have a YouTube series now with Jesse Sams, with whom I worked on Motherland Fort Salem, where we create a language live on the stream 2 hours a time or 2 hours a week, and we just kind of build it up as we go. We finished our first language, Ingala, during season 1, and we're 14 episodes into season 2 working on a language for opossums. Anyway, so this is a picture of me when I was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, 1999. They look pretty much the same now, almost. I have clearer skin in some places and not in others. That's funny. Anyway, but as a freshman at UC Berkeley, I came in as a declared English major uh, because that was my life goal at that time was to finish my English major, become a high school English teacher, and then to write fiction during the summer. But sometime I was also super interested in language though. So I started taking a bunch of languages to fill up extra units in addition to my English major coursework. So my first semester I took Arabic and just Arabic because I didn't know how I would adjust to college, but I adjusted very well. And so then the next semester I took my English major courses, and then I took the second semester of Arabic, the first semester of Russian, and a semester of Esperanto, all at the same time. Esperanto is a language that was created in 1887 to facilitate international communication. And it happened to be taught by two students who were my same year, who were fluent Esperanto speakers, native Esperanto speakers. They had been raised speaking Esperanto, one in Russia and one in Korea. And they separately learned Russian and Korean as their other first languages, and then they learned English as their third languages. And then they were teaching this class at 18. It's pretty cool. Anyway, this is where I learned about language creation. I never imagined that somebody could, create a language before I heard about Esperanto. And so that was kind of a big surprise to me. But I figured like, well, somebody created Esperanto and it seems to be the big one. So that's about the end of it. The next semester I was persuaded by my mother to take a course in linguistics, which I did because it fulfilled the breadth requirement. I didn't know anything about linguistics, the scientific study of language. And also I thought it was rather silly because you didn't actually learn any languages. You just kind of learned about them. But after one day in the course, I was completely hooked. And so I kept up with it. And after a couple of months, being in a linguistics course kind of gave me the idea, what if I created a language not for international communication like Esperanto, since it was pretty good with that? What if I just created a language for fun? And so I did. I started creating a language for fun. And I really took to it. I kept up with linguistics. I added it as a second major. Finished my English major though, so I double majored. And then at the end of my tenure, decided to switch focus, and instead of pursuing my dream of being an English teacher, decided to go to graduate school, where I went and so I applied to Santa Barbara and UC San Diego. I got into both, and I chose UC San Diego. Now, this was the time period, this was 2003 to 2006. So this is before the first iPhone, which meant that I didn't really take a lot of pictures. So this is like the only picture I have of where I lived in UC San Diego. I have very few pictures of me I don't think I have any pictures of me on campus. But yeah, this is where I lived. This was an apartment at Regents. It's a graduate student housing. So if you ever take the Regents shuttle where it picks up, that's where I lived. And this is our little 2-bedroom apartment at the time. Anyway, so I stayed in linguistics in graduate school until my master's, and then after that left to teach community college, which I could do since I finished my English major and had a master's in linguistics. So yeah, if you're ever thinking of changing majors, see if you can hold on to the first one. It'll probably help you out someday. But yeah, while I was at UCSD, I think I really kind of gained the final pieces of knowledge I needed to become the language creator I am today. Anyway, so yeah, 2006, I left UCSD, went to teach community college up in Orange County, which is where I'm from and where I still live. At Fullerton College for 2 years. Then I did nothing. Then in 2009, out of nowhere, the Language Creation Society was solicited by Dan Weiss specifically, who was one of the producers of Game of Thrones, to create the Dothraki language. And so what the Language Creation Society did is they put together a competition that was going to be announced to language creators everywhere. And these were the instructions for the first round. The first round was going to be judged by other language creators, and then the final round would be judged by the producers. Anyway, so these are the 5 things that they asked for. Some of them are pretty prosaic, you know. So one was just saying that you were going to enter a contract if you won. And next was saying, let's describe the sounds of the language, how it was going to be written so that the actors could read it, do some translations. But then number 5 was the sticking point. Any additional grammatical notes or translations you want considered, any. And we had about a month. So what this meant was somebody was going to have to be the asshole who spent every single hour of their day creating as much as they possibly could. And I was determined that that was going to be me. So what I did, by the way, in creating the Dothraki language, so this is for Game of Thrones, and it's a language that exists in the books that George R. R. Martin wrote in some form, but not in a complete form. So there were things like this. In the first one, in the book of Game of Thrones, it says, Rach, 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 Haj, a boy, a strong boy. So I figured, if this entire show is supposed to hook, fans of the book series, then what I should be doing is trying to create a language that looks exactly like what the fans of the book series would be expecting. So for example, if you see something like this and you're given a translation like that, assuming that the translation is accurate, it makes sense that probably, Rach is boy, Haj is strong. And then there were a bunch of other little snippets of Dothraki. So we have something like this, Halakka Dothrae, she shriek, the prince is writing, which is the translation. We have names like Khal-Drogo. And then also, so you have Halakka Dothrae, the prince is writing, but then you also have Halakka Dothrae Mranha, a prince rides inside me. So Occam's razor basically tells you that Halakka is probably not just a prince, but also the prince. In fact, there probably isn't a word for the or in Dothraki, because it was translated both ways as the prince and a prince. Dothrae probably means rides and is riding, because again, it was translated both ways. The prince is riding and also a prince rides inside me. And then Mranha is probably the part that means inside me. And also looking at words like this, which all come in the book, Khal, Khalesi, Khalakka, Dothrak, Dothraki, Dothrae, Dothrak, you begin to figure out that, all right, this language probably does what it does with suffixes as opposed to prefixes. And the modifiers for anything probably come afterwards. So Vais Dothrak is the name of a city. Vais Doloro is the name of another city. So Vais is probably a word for city or something like it. Haj is a strong boy, and the word for strong comes second. So, basically I analyzed all the stuff that was in the books, figured out what the grammar should be in order for the stuff in the books to work, and then just expanded on it in a way that made sense with everything that I figured out. So this is new stuff that I created, and you can see that I did more suffixes. I made sure that the adjective noun order was the same. So it's khal, haj, strong khal, not the other way around. And then in this amount of time, so this was September 9th to September 26th, 2009, I created the following. So a grammar document that was 143 pages long, 21 pages of dialogue, and then a 17-page summary of the whole thing. This is what it looked like at that time. Anyway, so that was the whole Dothraki language, circa September 26th, 2009. I made it to the second round with 4 other finalists, John Quijada, Bill Weldon, Sherry Wells Jensen, and Simone Olivier. And then they gave us another 16 days to expand what we had created. So expanded I did. And so I created over 300 pages of stuff, 301 total pages, in fact, including a bunch of ancillary material, just extra stuff that wasn't asked for, because again, what I really wanted was I wanted them to see that I had done so much work that they would feel bad for not choosing me. And partially I think it worked. But I also want to show you one page from this additional expanded material. So I had all of that dense linguistic stuff. And then I had this one page thing that I called Dothraki Fun Facts, where I said a bunch of things that I thought people who didn't know a lot about language might be interested in. So for example, the Dothraki have no word for sin or shame. And this is true because I just hadn't created those words yet. Simple enough. And then what are some other ones here? Oh yeah, the Dothraki have 4 different words for carry, 3 different words for push, 3 different words for pull, and at least 8 different words for horse, but no word which means please. And all of these things are true, but they don't necessarily mean anything. Is the issue here? I mean, but people who don't know a lot about language might think that they mean something. For example, like the different words for carry, push, and pull. It's something that happens in language. In languages where it's referring to whether you're doing it with one hand, 2 hands, or if it's some inanimate object doing it, or if you're just like shoving with your shoulder. So that's just something languages may do or may not do. And in terms of horse words, English has over 50. Like, think about all the horse words that just limit yourself to sports teams and think about how many different horse words there are. Broncos, Colts, Stallions, Mustangs, Chargers, because that was referring to horses. There's just tons of different words for horses, but it doesn't mean that we English speakers are, horse riding, horseish people. They did play an important part in our history at some point in time, but it's not as if each of us English speakers goes about thinking about horses all day because we know words like foal and filly and mare. I did stand by the Dothraki having no word for please, but the producers actually turned this around, and then in the new draft of the pilot, added the line about Dothraki not having a word for thank you, which was unfortunate because they did have a word for thank you, which I then had to remove. Turns out, though, that that's not unrealistic. There are plenty of languages that lack words for thank you. There are plenty of languages where gratitude is expressed differently, and there's often not a word that accompanies it. Anyway, so I got the job, and then after that, I did a bunch of other stuff. So when it comes to creating languages, though, like when you're actually doing it, the top question that you have to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of this language that you're creating, right? Like, why is it coming into existence? So like, if it's just for you, then you can absolutely just do whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. However, if it's for a group of fictional speakers, I like to think that you should do what makes sense. And so the question is, what does make sense? Well, if your fictional speakers are human, then their language should be plausibly human and do things that human languages do. If your fictional speakers are humans with 8 legs, then it should be plausibly human with very, very minor changes that accommodate for the fact that these speakers have 8 legs. To them, pants probably don't mean the same thing. They probably have an entire different thing going on. But for the most part, a language for humans and a language for humans with 8 legs, they're going to look very similar. The differences might be exciting and worthy of note because it's like, ooh, look at these different words they have. But in terms of like the grammar, how the language evolves over time, how it's used, I mean, it's probably going to be pretty much the same. All the alien languages I've created, the aliens have not been different enough from human beings to warrant a truly alien language. It'd be fun to do that one day, but none of the aliens that I've worked with have warranted anything like that. Anyway, so the approach that I'm describing here is what's called naturalism. Which is when I am creating a language, I try to create a language that a linguist might think was actually a natural language that they simply hadn't discovered yet, found someplace on Earth. Naturalism comes in 2 varieties, weak and strong. Strong naturalism, it's basically the idea is you try to emulate what it was like for our languages that exist on Earth. You try to emulate everything that produced them. In other words, just follow those steps, and hopefully at the other end, you get a naturalistic language. Weak naturalism does something different. It takes a look at all the natural languages that exist on the planet and says, like, you know, all right, if 80% of languages do this, then your language should be 80% likely to do this. If 50% of languages do this, then your language should be 50% likely to do this, and so on and so forth. There are kind of pros and cons for each one. A weak naturalism approach takes less time, but it's a lot more work to get right. Strong naturalism is a lot less work, but it takes a lot more time. Simple as that. So with weak naturalism, it's kind of like you throw in random semi-principled irregularities for flavor, just kind of like knowing that, well, English has some irregular plurals, maybe this language will have some irregular plurals. And there will be random idiosyncrasies here and there. You know, like kind of like in English, we have, you know, we have third person singular in the present and then non-third person singular, except for to be, where we have a special one for first person singular, am, right? And then everywhere else it's are or is. Anyway, and you kind of make it look like the sounds changed over time. It's faster, but you have to invent everything by hand, and it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Strong naturalism, on the other hand, you create an old language, a very, very old language, and then you create sound changes and apply them and basically affect change over time. You kind of like simulate the erosion and the evolution of a natural language over the course of 1,000 or 2,000 years, however long you want to do it. And it takes a much longer. But then all the regularities just kind of happen. So you don't have to even bother with them. They just happen as a matter of course. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, so you can see how this works. So we have this ly suffix in English, right, that we think of as the adverb suffix. So that's how you get quickly from quick. But then you also have nightly, and nightly isn't an adverb, right? It's actually an adjective. So you don't say like, you know, he rode into the tent nightly, unless you meant he did it every night. Thank you, English spelling. No, you'd say like he has a knightly bearing, or he was a very knightly gentleman. Anyway, same suffix though. And what's interesting to note is that, of course, quick is an adjective, but night is a noun. That's what's happening here. And this actually comes from a word like. So it used to be quick like and night like. That comes way back from this older form in German. And so that's actually how we got it. That's why there's the distinction, by the way. So a noun plus ly makes an adjective, an adjective plus ly makes an adverb. But the whole idea is that it comes from like, and this oldest one, by the way, it means in the body of. So in the body of somebody who is quick, or in the body of somebody who is a knight. And that's how we got these words. Anyway, there are two types of created languages, a priori and a posteriori. A priori is for aliens. This is an alien from Defiance, a Castan, very human-looking alien, but an alien nonetheless. And then a posteriori means something that was derived from the languages that we have here on Earth. So this is Lexa from The 100. And The 100, of course, is a show that took place in America 150 years after a cataclysm. And so all of these people were descendants of those who spoke English. So for a language like that, which is called Trigeta slang, you have these two words, decide and gather in English. And in Trigeta slang, they evolved, changed their sounds, and so they became sad and gera from these same words. So decide and gather becomes sad and gera. Gera became a suffix that when you added it to something meant like a place, or how do you even say that, like a place or a way or where something happens. So Sadgera is a conclave, a place where decisions are made. The same principle that works basically with these languages that derive on Earth can be applied to alien languages as well, because they do basically the same type of thing. So in Castan, there's an old verb that means tamalu, or I'm sorry, tamalu, that means to listen. And then there's an old word, puru, which meant whole. That became a suffix. It's applied, and you get tamabuno, and that means audience. Basically, it's a collective of people that listen. You can do the same thing with grammar. So There was a show I worked on called Emerald City, which was a dark version of The Wizard of Oz. And the Munchkins were reimagined as the Munchkin, which this is one of them. And they had an old word, enju meant abandon or leave. So you might say something like enju raisa pagi owage. The girl leaves the valley. By the way, the little asterisk means this is the older form of the language, not the current form. So this is the older form of the language. But oh yeah, and yellow is something different. Don't worry about that. It's exactly does it mean? The girl leaves. I don't even remember. Don't worry. It's been a while since that show. In the modern language, that became injuri sapa awaga. The girl leaves the valley. And remember, it was that. I really don't remember what pagi is. Gosh, I wish I could remember. Anyway, so, but you could take the same situation and say something like this. Injurai sa pagi gezo ori. The girl abandons doing running. That's something that that you could have said in the oldest form of the language. This too changed over time, and so injuri sazuri, the girl doesn't run. So this same word that just meant abandon or leave has now become a negative marker. And so basically a little bit of grammar was just created from a word. Here's another a posteriori language. This one was fun. So this was Into the Badlands, which was set in like the Southwest, but like 500 years in the future. And they had me create a language for a group of people from a city called Azra, which was supposed to be, or the city was in modern day Mexico. So 500 years, the countries are gone, but it's where Mexico used to be, was in northwest or east. I don't know. I think northeast Mexico is where the city was. So I created the Azran language from Spanish. And so we have words like, these are Spanish words like La Paz, La Hija, El Güero, that mean that. And then they become the modern Azran words, Laba, Ler, and Uel. Some of them have the same meaning, some of them have different meanings. And so in Spanish, you could say something like, Ya los he encontrado, I have already found them. And this became the modern, Yo los encontré, I discovered them. You can kind of figure out how the sound changes happen, but there is a lot of stuff that happened. The Azran is it's a tonal language, because I always thought, given just the right push, Spanish could become a tonal language, and it would be so much fun. Anyway, so for Spanish speakers, you can try to figure out how this works. This might be fun. But okay, let me see if I can do this just straight off. Okay. Lojo zate dalas welt ko mumijon e uzate chayel upueha ge banaflaja. I have fate. Grant us favor in our task and bring strength to those who waver. Now, these are the Spanish words that it came from. So this is word for word. So it's not like fluent Spanish, but it's where all those words came from. So you can kind of see how it works and figure it out. You know what I should have done? I should have just put them side by side or one above the other. Now I just have to do this. Woo, woo. Oh well. Next time I go back in time and do this again, I'll do that. Anyway, just some other fun ones I just wanted to show. There are, because of course culture does play a role in this, in terms of how you create a language. So there's literal meaning, right? And then there's actually how the meaning is used. So in Dothraki, there's this expression, torga esche, under a roof, but what it means is in secret, because this comes straight from the books. In Dothraki, they feel that everything of importance should be done under the open sky as opposed to under a roof. And they don't have like buildings aside from ad hoc constructions that they put up when they settle somewhere for a few weeks. And so this was just an idea I extrapolated from their culture, that if you do something under a roof, the idea is you're like doing it on the sly. For Castathan, there was this word yavi, which meant of a lower caste, and now it means rough or coarse, because the Castathan culture that they created for this show, there was a heavily stringent caste structure. And by the way, that's why they were called Castathans. It wasn't It wasn't the sci-fi people that came up with that. It was the video game, because there was supposed to be a video game that went with the show at the same time. They were like, oh, this society is a caste system, so let's call them the Castathans. It's terrible. But anyway, and we were just stuck with it. Anyway, though, so just based on kind of like our understanding of their culture, I thought this made a lot of sense. And then for Munchkin, this is a fun one. So Munchkin, of course, came from the Munchkins, and I was a huge fan of the Oz books as a kid. And so one of the things you learn if you read through the original Oz books is that the land of Oz is divided into, or at least the main land of Oz is divided into 5 parts, with the Emerald City in the middle, and then the 4 great nations around the Emerald City. One of them is the Munchkin country. Each one has a color associated with it, and the Munchkin's color is blue. And so I took the word for blue for the Munchkins, or the Munjakin, and it's 0 derived, so that it means blue, but it also means excellent. It's kind of drawing on that theme. And of course, by the way, the word for blue comes from L. Frank Baum's name, Bomi. Anyway, so that's just kind of an overview of what I do when I'm creating languages for these things. And this is my little boy, Roman, who's a very, very good boy who never bites or scratches me too much. Anyway, this is where you can find me online. And with the rest of our time, I will answer whatever questions you have about anything. It can be stuff in the presentation, or it can just be stuff about shows I've worked on, or anything else, like, you know, stuff about La Jolla, for example, where to get pizza, which, by the way, Regent's Pizzeria, very close to you. Oh my goodness, that is some good deep dish. So if you haven't been there, like, it's right next to where I lived. It was disastrous for my waistline, but so good. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. I will stop the screen share, but if you want me to pull up a slide at any point in time, just let me know. No problem at all. Okay.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions from the audience, and we're just gonna kind of go through them. And if you have any questions that have come up, make sure to submit them in the Q&A, and we're just gonna kind of go through the audience questions, and we'll go from there. So
Okay, cool.
The first one comes from Vincent, and it says, how much grammar do you typically put in a conlang, and at what point are there enough grammatical features for a conlang to be usable for daily conversations?
You pretty much have to have all of the grammar if you're going to do any translation that requires a conjugated verb, because really the toughest part for the grammar is the verb itself. Verbs are notoriously tricky in every single language, and I'm not talking about like if they have a bunch of conjugations like Spanish or whatever. If you have to learn a bunch of conjugations, yes, it's a lot of memorization. It's very difficult. But if you don't, then all of that information has to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere in the clause. And so then you end up having to learn a whole bunch of stuff. So like if you compare English's verbs to Spanish's, like we have barely anything to learn, right? You add the S for third person singular, and then you have to figure out what the past tense is, and then add ing. And that's really it. And so it seems like our verbs are very simple. But then you got these things where English speakers are saying, like, in order for me to have done that, I would have needed to have gone, before they came back. And you just have like all this junk where you're saying like you would have had to have and things like that. And so it's like, yeah, we don't have a bunch of verb conjugations, but then you have to learn that garbage. And so, as a language creator, that's the part that's the toughest part, because verb systems they're notoriously fickle. Like verb systems will change generation to generation. So like your parents won't use verbs the same way that you do, but nouns probably more or less the same, and so it's hard as a language creator to create that, because it's, I don't know, it's like trying to hammer a fish. That was a weird. Okay, I said that because it's something that I have experienced in my life. It was that fish that we caught, and then my mother thought that we could just put it in the freezer and it would die, but then it didn't. So then we had to take it to the next person's camper, and the guy tried to hammer the fish, but it kept slipping away. Anyway, that's verbs. So yeah, I when I consider the verb system more or less complete, I consider the grammar like more or less complete. There's always other stuff out there like clause structure and stuff, and it is important, but it's a lot easier after you have your verbs taken care of. Now, it doesn't mean you can actually start using a language well before you've settled on every issue, right? Because in my experience, the grammar actually continues to be fleshed out as you create more verbs. There's a wonderful book by Beth, I don't know if it's Beth Levin or Beth Levine, but anyway, it's Levin, on the verb classes of English. And she has identified, I believe, 140 verb classes in English. And what I mean by verb class is like compare two very similar verbs semantically, eat and devour. You can say, I ate a banana. You can also say, I ate. With devour, you can say, I devoured a banana, but you can't say, I devoured. It doesn't work. And so as a result, these verbs belong to two separate verb classes. You know, one is one where you can have an object or not, and the other one is where you absolutely must have an object. And so she's identified 144 different classes of verbs in English that are all slightly different depending on how they can be used in a sentence. So as a language creator, sometimes it's like, well, I need this new verb. You create it and you discover, okay, this actually is going to be used in a slightly different way from any other verb that has ever existed in this language. And so suddenly, like a new like corner of grammar is created. But yeah, by the time you've gotten to that point, you can probably do like most things. I would say for all the languages I've created, none of them are complete, first off, because I don't think a language can be complete. I don't think it makes sense to even describe a language, created or otherwise, as being complete. It's either still being developed or it's not, either, you know, actively by a language creator or by a community of speakers. And that's really all there is to it. So like all my languages are still ongoing and still being built, and none of them are finished, and none of them have a totally fully complete grammar. But many of them are good enough for use in everyday conversation. So anyway, I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Our next question was, did that first language you created, influence any of the languages you later created for TV or film? How's the experience?
Yeah, I didn't really talk about the first language I created. I have talked about it elsewhere, but it's really, really, really bad, which is something that I think now I should have expected, and pretty much all language creators expect. Your first language is usually really bad. And so there comes a point where you realize that that your language is bad, just irredeemable. And so you do one of two things. You either abandon it or you keep working on it, and make it better. And I know plenty of people who've kept working with their first languages and made them better. But you know, with mine, it made sense to just abandon it. And so I did. It was too big and too irredeemable. There was nothing that I could garner from it. And if you want to read a full essay, then I actually wrote it up. Let me see. I'll put it in the don't capitalize HTTPS. Come on. I'll put it in the comments here. So yeah, if you want to read about why my first language was so bad, I went into detail about why it was so bad. But ultimately, a language has to fulfill a function, right? So either it's intended to be a naturalistic language, or it's intended for international communication, or it's intended to be like easy to learn, or it's intended to be beautiful, or it's intended to be something that's just for you that you like. Ultimately, that first language fulfilled none of those goals, none of them. I mean, the very basic goal that any language you create has to clear is that you have to like it. And I didn't like it anymore. So there was just no point to continue on with it. I don't know if it's influenced my future work in a positive way, but maybe in a negative way, you know, always trying to make sure I don't repeat the same mistakes. But you know, at the time, of course, it was a really wonderful experience to develop my first language. I mean, honestly, it's hard to recapture that feeling, you know, the very first time, and so I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question asks, when you're creating a language, if cultural aspects affect how you determine the sound of it, and also whether or not you've ever made a dialect.
No, typically there's no relationship between culture and the sound of a language. And when I say typically, I mean, that's just me trying to be an academic and hedge. What I really want to say is there's absolutely no correlation whatsoever between culture and the sound of a language. Zero, just none. You'll often see comments, or you'll see articles written here and there, like, and they'll make their way into the popular press from time to time. Always look to make sure that those articles are written by linguists. Most of the time they're not. Anytime you see really outrageous claims about language and that there's a paper associated with it, look at the author. Most of the time it's not a
All right. Let's see. I think we're having a technical issue. Just a second, everyone. Let's see if we can get David back. I think we're having, oh, there he is. All right. I think we were just having some technical difficulties. Just a second. Hopefully everyone's been enjoying the panel so far, or the presenter so far.
Hello?
Keep the questions rolling. Oh, here we are. We're back.
Okay. All right. What was the last thing everybody heard? Hello?
Yeah, so you were.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Is,
Okay, what
wasn't
was
it
the
popular
last thing
press?
everybody heard?
The last thing that I was able to catch was checking the author of the paper to see if they were a linguist.
Oh yeah, because most of the time they're not. And so the one that came to mind actually was, I don't know if anybody remember, there was a TED Talk a while back about this guy claiming that languages that lack a future tense, their speakers don't save money, as well as languages that do have a future tense. And it was just absolute, complete, and total bullshit. Like, there wasn't even a claim to be made there, just because it didn't even have the facts about language right. So everything that followed from that was just totally spurious. Anyway, so yeah, no relationship between culture and sound. But there was a second part to that question, and what was the second part to that question?
Whether or not you have ever made a dialect.
Yes, actually. So on Game of Thrones, actually, if you so I created High Valyrian, right, which was the language that Daenerys spoke, but the language that was spoken in Astapor was called Astapori Valyrian. And then in season 4, they went to Meereen and they wanted a different sounding language. But it didn't make sense to me that it should be a different language from Astapori. So Meereenese Valyrian is actually a dialect. Well, I guess Astapori is too. Well, okay, every single language is a dialect, right? But what I'm saying is that Astapori Valyrian and Meereenese Valyrian, same language, just with two different, you know, radically different accents. So yes, I have done that.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to another question. So one question is, you mentioned that with strong naturalism, you can sit back and watch the language evolve. So what does that look like in practice?
Well, this is what it looks like. I want you to imagine that, like, there's like 3 different levers, right? And it's like, you know, and so you got like a mass of dough, and you press one lever and it does one thing, you press the other lever and it does a different thing. But the dough is just changing as a result. So it's like, say that what you wanted to do, like say you created in your old language, your proto language, a simple like verb agreement system. So it was like 6 persons, you know, first, second, third, singular and plural, and they all have different agreement patterns, right? In fact, let's just create a little bit. I'll do this in the chat. So let's just say you have a verb like, I don't know, means to flutter your eyelashes. All right. And the word for fluttering your eyelashes is, so we have mandan, which is I flutter my eyelashes. And then the rest, it's going to be you, he, she, and so on. So you have mandan, mandak.
David, really quick to interrupt. I believe you sent it to all panelists, not all panelists and attendees, which is another option in the chat.
Ooh. Hold on. There we go. So we have that. Then you have something like mandak, mandal, mandar, mandas, man, and then I don't know, mandaf. All right, whatever. No, I didn't mean mandat, I meant mandaf. Okay, whatever. All right, so you can see it's very, very, very simple, very, very cookie cutter. All right. But then let's say so that's one thing that exists, right? But then let's say you decide, I'm going to add some sound changes to my language. One sound change that I know of, for example, is that from Polynesian to Hawaiian, the sounds S and F merged into H. So, you know, everybody knows the word aloha in Hawaiian. If you go over to some place like Samoa, the word is alofa with an F. That was just an example. And like the, you know, Samoa, for example, obviously they have an S that doesn't exist in Hawaiian anymore. So they just decided, all right, I'm going to have S and F become H in this language. And so that's a decision you decide that's going to apply the entire language. But then if you go and look at your verbs, suddenly the, let's see, what the second person plural becomes mandah. So this is, don't you autocorrect me. So this is you all flutter your eyelashes. And then the third person plural also becomes mandah. They flutter their eyelashes. And so suddenly you have a slightly irregular verb system where, for whatever reason, the second person plural and third person plural are pronounced the same, totally identically. But you didn't do it on purpose, though, right? You did it because there was just this sound change and you thought it would be cool if your language merged these sounds just like Hawaiian did. And so something that you did over here affected something that exists over here in a very crucial way. And the thing is, if you continue on in this fashion, maybe suddenly the agreement doesn't even work anymore, or it doesn't work as well. For example, in French, there is agreement there, right? There is agreement just like there is in Spanish, but it's not strong enough that you can just drop the pronouns. So in Spanish, you can drop the pronouns and say, you know, hablo, and that means I speak. But you can't do that anymore in French because there's not strong enough agreement on the verb that you can hear to support the dropping of the pronouns. And so suddenly French can't drop its pronouns anymore. So that's the type of thing I mean. That's kind of like how it works. That's kind of like how it unfolds by itself. You just do like one thing over here that affects the entire language, and then you just see how it affects it. And then as you kind of see how it affects it, you react and say, all right, well, suddenly if no speakers are able to figure out how this works anymore, they have to do something else. And so they do something else. So that's kind of how it goes. Like that language dough.
Okay, thank you. So I will say, like a time check, it is 2:53. Technically, the event is slotted to end at 3, but if people are okay with staying, we could extend it since we don't have an event after this. But
yeah, I'm happy to stay however long people are willing to stay for. So
because we do have a lot of questions lined up. We will try to get through them, but there are a lot. Okay, so one question. Oh, sorry, there's so many. Okay, so do you ever translate slang into languages? What would LOL sound like in Dothraki?
No, I can't. There's, gosh, I remember there was once like somebody who said like, how do you translate this into Valyrian? And it was like a meme, but it was, I don't know, they called it like the good shit meme. And it was just like a string of like random words and emojis. And it's just like, this doesn't, I'm not even gonna do this. No, languages, I mean, languages, of course, the languages I create, they all have their own slang and their own curse terms, but sometimes translation is just too much. Like, ugh, don't even want to bother.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question comes from Justin. How does the process work when you're creating languages that aren't derived from the English alphabet? For example, ones that would include unique symbols?
Well, of course, I mean, the languages aren't derived from an alphabet, and you can just use them to type anything. So, for example, like Japanese isn't derived from the English alphabet, but you can still write something like, you know, you can still write something like that. Watashi wa sushi o tabemashita, right? I ate sushi. So it's like you can just write that. And so when for all the languages that I'm using, especially, you know, when I'm working with the actors, I find a way to write them in the English alphabet, because you have to. It's just the easiest thing to do. For linguists, what linguists do, International Phonetic Alphabet, and that's what I default to when I'm just, you know, transcribing things. But it's handy to have what we call a romanization system, which is a way to write it using the Roman alphabet. But then when it comes to like how I create writing systems, that's like a totally different process, but very similar in many ways to language evolution, because the writing systems that we have also evolved. They just evolved via a different process. And in fact, we know the entire history of writing, unlike the history of language, where there's a point where we just don't know. Writing, we know it all. And most writing began with just pictures, right? And then something happened that caused the writers to map pictures to sound. And then where they go from there, it depends. There were lots of splits. It was a convoluted method to get an alphabet that is one letter per sound as opposed to one letter per consonant or something different. But when I'm creating my own writing systems, I can do the same thing. I can imagine an older state where it was just pictographic, where it was written on stone, and then imagine what happened when that moved to paper, how it moved from like the picture stage to the sound stage, and then kind of evolve the writing system on up. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do. So I have a lot of fun doing that. Anyway, but yeah, like the answer to that question could be an entire talk. It actually has been an entire talk before. So I'll have to see. I think I probably have done something like that online. You can hunt around. I might have a thing there.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And here's another question, and this one might be an interesting question to answer. And this one's from Dana. How much linguistics do you need to know in order to create your own conlang?
I mean, none, right? Like you just need to start in order to do it. And then, but then like, I guess there's separate questions. Like, how much do you know to create something that other people are going to be impressed by, or to create something that you like? Because that's actually a hard thing too. Sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily know what you like and you try to create it and you create something and you realize it doesn't sound very good. You know, I don't think that I really don't think you need to know linguistics at all. It can be helpful, but in some ways it can also be harmful. There's a lot of theory in there that doesn't actually apply and you think it might, and so it ends up interfering. But you know, I found it useful. I found three things very, very useful. One was studying linguistics. Two was studying languages, like studying languages to learn them. I found that incredibly useful. Even just studying their grammars, if I wasn't like trying to actually learn how to speak them, studying their grammars, I found very helpful. And not related languages, very, very different languages, just to really kind of get the breadth and scope of it. And then practice. That's the other thing. So yeah, all three of those things I found tremendously helpful, and I wouldn't say any one of them was more important than any other. They were all kind of equally important for me.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next one's kind of has a little bit of background to it. So from an anonymous attendee, let's say an alien ship decides to come to Earth. Assuming they're wearing a mask, how long do you think it would take for us to determine if what they're saying is an actual language or is just gibberish and they have a totally different way to communicate?
I don't think it would take too long. However, caveat here is that there are a lot of assumptions we make about how communication must work that are crucially dependent on our experience as human beings. I would not be surprised if, at the point where we do meet actual intelligent life in the universe, their communication system is something we can't even recognize as communication. Well, it's like, I guess there would be two things that wouldn't surprise me. One, if that was the case, or two, if it turned out, nope, we're actually all humanoids. That's the only possibility for intelligent life on this planet, on this universe, is something that's vaguely humanoid. Seems like it's going to be one of those, either totally way out there, or it's all just Star Trek and they're all just humans with ridges or something. So here's the thing. If it was a communication system that was oral, or oral that you could hear, right? And their brains worked more or less the way ours do in terms of working memory and things like that, it would not take long to figure out if it was gibberish or not. Like, it wouldn't take long at all. It doesn't take long watching a television show. Like, one sentence, no. Two sentences, maybe. Like 3 or 4 sentences, it just rises exponentially. If it's like an entire episode and it's gibberish, it becomes really obvious. And if you ever want to test yourself and see, listen to the untitled Sigur Rós album, the one with like those two like sausage parentheses looking things. They sing in something they call Hopelandic, which is obviously not a language. And yeah, by like song 3 or 4, you recognize it because they say the same damn thing over and over again. And it's like, that doesn't work. Based on everything we know about what it means to actually communicate, no, that just doesn't work. So yeah, if certain fundamental assumptions hold true, it would be very easy to figure out if it was gibberish or an actual language. Even if we couldn't figure out the language, it would be easy to figure out.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question asks whether when you're creating a language, you would create the writing system or pronunciations first, and then how you sort of go from one to the other.
I create the pronunciations first, and then it's not as if one is necessarily 100% based on the other, because that's not how it works in the real world either. They both kind of have an independent evolution, or definitely the phonetic system does, and it's usually considered to be like primary. But for the writing system, remember that writing is not initially based on sound. It's actually initially based on ideas, semantics. It's only later applied to sound. So that's really the way I go about it. I think about, all right, at what point in time in the evolution of this language are its speakers figuring out that you can apply these pictures to sound? And then how do they go about it? How do they figure it out? How accurate are they? And then from there, I move forward and decide, like, will they have changed things? Will they have edited it moving forward? So that's how I go about it, really.
Thanks. Here's another question. So this question says, I know it's common for multilingual people to forget languages if they don't use them as much. Are you still fluent in all the languages you have created? If so, do you need to constantly talk to others in your languages to keep them, or have you just worked on them for so long that you remember them forever?
Oh, easy answer. I've never been fluent in any language I've created, and honestly, I don't expect that that will ever happen. You get kind of good with them because, you know, when you're working with just one language on a show for many years, you know, I got pretty good with Dothraki. I got pretty good with High Valyrian when I was creating the Duolingo. Um, but no, not fluent, not anything close to approaching fluency. Everybody learns languages differently. For me, I really need to work with a native speaker, and I need to listen a lot, and I need to practice a lot to have any kind of confidence in the language at all. If I haven't taken a class in it, it's not happening. I'm not going to be able to speak it. And of course, I haven't done that with any of my languages. So yeah, but you know, it's not a big deal. I don't really care about being fluent in them. So I'm with it.
Right, we have another question from an anonymous attendee. When developing languages for universes like Shadow and Bone, I love that series, they said from the attendee, do you try to take world building aspects into account? Do you have any particular examples?
I never have examples, but yeah, I do. But yeah, that was a good one. Lee Bardugo is a friend of mine, so most of the time with like Shadow and Bone specifically, I would just text her and say, "What is this? I want to make sure I do it right for you." But yeah, I do, and I did some examples in the talk. I don't know what's another one. I hate remembering examples like this. What's a good one where there's world building? I don't know, like I don't know. Yes, I do. Can I just say yes and be done with it? Sorry. There are
Absolutely.
examples, I promise. Yeah.
We've all been there. Let's see. Our next question: is there a list of words or phrases that you always translate to each new language?
I try to start with if we're talking humanoid speakers, I try to start with basic terms. And if you want to get like a list of basic terms, the Leipzig Jakarta list is a really good one. I don't have like a link to that, but I can at least get the spelling right, so you can go look it up on Wikipedia, for example. But I like to start off with things that are very, very basic and likely to be found in any language, and likely not to be derived from something else. So things like rock. Rock is always like one of my first words because it's like, that'll be there. And then, you know, move on to more complex things, move on to compounds and zero derivations and things like that. But yeah, so like there's probably like a ton of words that are in every language, but also some of them might not be very interesting. So like words like what, and that, and where are in all of my languages are just not very exciting.
All right, here's another question we have. And what's the most convoluted grammatical system, in your opinion, you've done for a language still meant to be naturalistic?
Who? Let me read that question. Where? Whose was it?
This is from Diego.
That's nice. Probably the one that I did for Star-Crossed. Sondive. That was really convoluted. I liked what I did. I mean, it was slightly alien, but it was supposed to be naturalistic. But it was, oh, it's nice. Look at my thumb. So in that one, there was a case system of sorts, but none of it had any meaning. It was based on it was based crucially on what tense the verb was in. And so you couldn't even know what the cases meant unless you knew what tense the verb was in. And it was very convoluted, and I still don't know how to do possession. Possession was very difficult. And it involved different prefixes and suffixes, kind of like jumping from one word to another. It depended crucially whether things were before or in front of another word. It actually resulted in OSV word order, not because that's how I created it. I created it with SVO word order, but based on how things shook out, OVS made more sense, which was weird. I certainly didn't intend for that. But yeah, that was a weird one. That's probably the most convoluted system I've ever created. So weird. I can't believe I did it for that. It's just a weird one. No, sorry. So there were follow-up questions to this. It was for the sake of complexity. No, I don't know. It just felt like it worked for the system that I was creating. It made sense. It was essentially a type of map chain, right? If the tense, the way the tense was indicated, right? And it may have been slightly inspired by a conlang called Afrihili, which was not a, it was an auxlang, but the idea was you matched the edge of the verb with its argument that was closest to that edge. So since it was SVO word order, the subject was closest to the left edge and the object was closest to the right edge. And so you just matched it in sound. But then of course, since the sound matched and they were right next to each other, it didn't sound as good. So OSV made more sense so that there was a mismatch. It's kind of like how in Latin, if you think about words like solar and moral and molar, that's all the same suffix. It's just an R or an L depending on the opposite of what came before it. So like with molar, the suffix is after something that has an L, and so it's an R. With moral, it's the opposite. Same thing with solar, and all those other words that are like that. Anyway, and yeah, I guess they did start out more as clitics. Yeah, kind of, yeah. But it's like they didn't mean anything, you know, like I don't know, it was more just like alliteration or assonance or something like that. There's no meaning with that. Anyway, yeah, so I don't know. I just thought of the system and it seemed like fun. And it seemed to work out, so I did it. I thought it worked out all right.
All right, we're gonna start wrapping up soon. We have a couple more questions,
Sure.
but we'll start to speed up, and we are sorry for everyone if we can't get to your question.
I'll try to answer them quicker.
Our next one is so from Irene Shaw. What is your favorite word in English? But I guess it could be just your favorite word. And what's your favorite word in a language you constructed?
I don't think I have a favorite word. I certainly don't have a favorite word in any of the languages I've created. Favorite word in English? I probably don't. I have least favorite words. My least favorite word is crafts. Ugh, goodness gracious. It's the worst word in the history of the world. Hate it. Yeah, I don't think I have a favorite word. Just words I don't like, and crafts is at the top of that list. What a terrible word. What a terrible idea for a word. But yeah, I never have favorite words in my languages. I don't know why. Okay, sorry, I pulled up the Q&A list. I'm gonna start doing these. Any cat toy recommendations? Yes. Roman has this little kicky. It's like a long like fabric thing, and he grabs it and he rabbit kicks it with his feet, and he loves it. And you can throw it. That's the thing to get, and you want a good long one so that they can really get some kick into it. Chubi ancora por ora es esperante, non mine parolas esperante nun. And I don't remember how to say I'm sorry in Esperanto, but I did know at one point in time. That's I think that was, can you still speak Esperanto? Though for some reason Ankaro it struck me as meaning before. Do you ever run into problems when borrowing real words references for conlangs? No. However, I did run into problems with when I was working with Disney, and then the CW actually for our pardon, that's a good one. Because it was like I just created a word. Like I just created a word just out of nowhere, and they're like, you can't use this word because it sounds too much like this word in like in Visayan. Like what? This is coming from the legal department. That was always fun stuff. I had to like check if words that I was creating matched any other word that had a negative connotation in like any language on the planet. That was difficult. Because of how much a language can influence the world in which it lives, do you feel a lot of responsibility when creating a language for another person's work? I do. It's very difficult. And there's a lot of times where I feel like there are things I can't do. Like there's a lot I don't know about the world of Valyrian speakers, native Valyrian speakers, because it just has come up in the books, the Song of Ice and Fire books. And it's not my place to write any of that. With the Dothraki, like it's much clearer. Like I can extrapolate a lot because there's a lot of information about who they are, who the Dothraki people are. But like with the native Valyrians, it's shrouded in mystery. And so it's too much. And so there's just a lot of pieces of the Valyrian language that are blank and intentionally blank because I just don't know what to do with them. So yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. What word derivation, such as Bomita Blue and also excellent, that you've done, do you find especially creative or funny, or are you proud of in terms of ingenuity? Gosh darn it. This is another one of those ones where I'm not going to have anything just off the top of my head. There's been some really cool stuff I've done, but I can't remember any of it. I put a link in the chat to my wiki where you can get like more information about my various languages. It's wiki.languageinvention.com. And I put some cool stuff in there, and I wrote notes on stuff. So go there. There's good stuff there, I promise. Okay. What is one of your favorite idioms you have created for conlang? Since this is the last question, I will try to think up something. Ah, man. Oh, this is always so tough. Okay, what language? There's fun stuff in Valyrian. There's fun stuff in Erathian. Oh, that's a fun one, actually. So the word for hello in Erathian, I thought was pretty cool. It means without concealed weapons, eseneziri, and it works out just so. It works out just so because it made sense there would be a single word for concealed weapon and that it worked the way it did. And then I created an obessive suffix, which meant without. So that I thought that was a really cool like word for saying hello, because it's just pointing out how you greet somebody. You know, you greet them without weapons, and so you greet them happily. Anyway, so that was a fun one. Okay, and then I think that was all the questions.
Yeah, that was all the questions. So yeah, a round of applause for our speaker today. Yeah, we really appreciated having you. It was, such an interesting presentation and getting to hear your answers to the questions. And it seems like the chat is popping off right now. So yeah, I guess, that was our event today. And, any final words?
Cool. From me?
Yeah,
Or
from
somebody
you.
else?
Sorry, from you.
Okay, so like, yeah, man, let me tell you, when COVID is done, Old Town Mexican Cafe, so good, so good. They make their own tortillas. Oh, so good. High recommend. And of course, I look forward to coming back to campus one day. I still haven't seen this swing. Is it still up there? The huge swing.
No. I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Don't tell
I
me
don't
you
think
don't know
so.
about the huge swing that they put in.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know of a swing.
We got
No,
one
no, this
person
is brand
saying
new.
No. The swing.
They took it down. Oh no! It seemed like the dumbest
Oh.
idea. I wanted to see it.
Oh yeah, I think I know. I think they did take it down.
It was such a
Not
bad
sure.
idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
So, it was in like an out of the way place too. Like you wouldn't have seen it. It was not something you just run into across campus, because it was like it was like 100-foot swing. It was just the worst idea.
That must have been
It
why
was
they
like
took it down.
it was like near the freeway. It was near the freeway entrance. It's like it was not near where anybody lived. It was like it was going to be a part of their new entrance to UCSD. I think it was supposed to be near where the trolley picked up. By the way, is that done yet or no? The
It's
trolley?
supposed to be done soon.
I think it was supposed to be done like
This
this year
year.
/ last, but you know, so
Supposed to be done this year originally.
as of right now, it's not not
Yeah.
done.
So, anyways,
That's exactly what it's seemed like. You swung out over the traffic. It was just such a bad idea. Anyway,
yeah.
but yeah, I look forward to coming back. Maybe I can meet some of you in person one day.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
That'd be
that would be
great.
fantastic.
Yes.
that would be great. Yeah. So
All right.
thank you to all the attendees for coming for our first event of Winter GameFest, and make sure to stay updated on the Winter GameFest Discord for more information about events to come. And I'll drop the link in to join the Discord if you're not in the Discord. There's the link to join our Discord if you're not in the Discord, although I guess you would have found out about this through social media if you're not in the Discord. But there's our Discord link, and stay tuned for more updates, and hope to see you all at some of the other events. So thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Woo.